Oh, it's that sound that you just love to hear. This is your week 2 recap, and I will make no apologies for this episode being mostly about Paul. Hello, Paul. See, last season, most of you guys weren't listening, and I don't think all you guys listened to this. Maybe 2 more of you guys listened to the weekly recaps. So now that I have your attention, I feel that it is my duty to provide some context to you and why exactly he's just totally out of base. And let's get into it, shall we? Paul's been playing with us since the 2012 season, and since then, all he has managed to do was get a measly first-round victory against Orlando to then get eliminated by Andy in 2014. He's been eliminated by Andy twice in the playoffs, actually, which I think that's worth mentioning because when you get eliminated by Andy, a part of your soul dies. So Paul has just gotten one playoff victory, and last season he didn't even manage to make the playoffs. Last season in 2015, he ended the season with a record of 5-8. That's just last year. This year and last year have a connection. Oh, yes. There's a connection, and Paul is just eagerly, he just cannot wait to hear what this connection is. This connection actually has a lot to do with the discussion that we were having this past week about you and your moronic benching of your number one player, which this week worked to your advantage. But as I said, it's more often than not going to be a bad decision. Before we get into Paul's bad decisions, let me tell you a little something about myself. My name is Bundy. I won't even finish my name. You may have heard of me. The last 7 years in this league, I have made it to 4 championships, and I've won 2. Okay? So let me tell you something about Paul, now that I got that out of the way. Last season, Paul's number 1 pick was C.J. Anderson. Yes, the running back for the Denver Broncos. It was obviously a different team because there was a timeshare, I believe, that they were having with that other guy. I think it was Ronnie Hillman, and obviously Peyton Manning was at the helm. So he decides to draft this guy, number 1. Starts him the very first week, and C.J. Anderson scores about 3 points. What Paul does after that is the very same thing that he did just this week, is he decides to bench C.J. Anderson for Amir Abdullah, who got 0 points in week 2. And then he starts C.J. Anderson again, and C.J. Anderson just puts up 3 or 4 points. I can't see the benches on these past years, but I can only go on by what I see in the starting lineup. So it seems that Paul, a person who didn't make the playoffs last year, who ended with a record of 5-8, is still pretty much using the same strategies. He's drafting like he's a wild man. He's drafting like he's a person who takes chances on people who haven't shown a track record of providing stability and consistency. But he is managing his team like he's obsessed with consistency and stability. And I'll tell you exactly what I mean, kiddies, if you just sit the fuck down and let Bundy fucking school all of you. If you select somebody like a C.J. Anderson, if you select somebody like a Todd Gurley as your number 1 pick, and that was Paul's number 1 pick for this year, then what you're essentially saying is, I am on board with the hype. This is a person who has shown a small sample of quality, but due to the ESPN rankings, I am going to select this person, and I think this is a good decision. Now, that's a huge gamble, and it should be applauded. But when Todd Gurley doesn't show up week 1 because he has a tough matchup, and you decide to bench him for LeGarrette Blount, you are curling up into a ball of practicality. You are now drafting like a wild man and managing like a pussy, okay? And though you got the victory this week, yes, you got the victory this week, you still have not understood the concept of player economics. When you draft a player number one on your team, that player means something. He's not just the first pick. He's also the representation of what you didn't pick, what you had the opportunity to pick at the time. If I would have told you that you, Paul, could have picked up Cam Newton, and you pick up Cam Newton, which was my number one pick. I'm just using it as an example. I'm not saying you wanted Cam Newton. And Cam Newton gets a 4. Would you start Cam Newton the very next week? I think you would. Why? Well, it's a different position. He is a quarterback. He will have the ball the majority of the game. I get that. But also, Cam Newton isn't a first-year player, meaning first year of the league acknowledging him as this big weapon. Todd Gurley, his emergence was during the season. He was a prospect. He did what he had to do, and now he is the offense, and he is what the defense triggers against. Okay? If somebody told you that about Rob Gronkowski, if someone told you that you were to draft Rob Gronkowski round 1, which Hensel picked up, and let's say Gronk doesn't get hurt and Gronk gets a 2 or a 3 and he has a very tough matchup coming up next week, would you start Gronk or would you sit him down? You start him, right? You start him. So why do you choose to sit Gurley? You choose to sit Gurley because you made a decision which was based on the ESPN rankings. You didn't draft the team that you wanted. You auto-picked, motherfucker. Technically, Eric was the only person who auto-picked their first pick. But really, you auto-picked yours, and you showed us that what you did was an auto-pick. The player economics is based on that. It's based on what was available to you at the time, and you're saying a lot about a player when you choose to pick that person number 1. What I love about all this is the following. What I love about this is you dumb motherfuckers who do shit like this, who bench your number 1 picks without any fucking injury with just 1 week. That's all Todd Gurley had to do. Todd Gurley just didn't perform like he's expected to perform for 1 week, and he has a matchup with the fucking Seattle Seahawks, and that's it. That's all it takes. You're not like, well, he's going to get a red zone touchdown. That's the value of your team. That's the economics of your team. That's what you're telling us. That's how you feel about your team moving forward. What I love about this is Todd Gurley say he isn't the player that he was supposed to be this season, right? So Todd Gurley gets, he for the next few weeks, he gets a combined total of 15 points. Logically, what Paul would then try to do, I would argue that he should have done this a while ago, is he would try to trade Todd Gurley. Now, here's where the economics comes into the brain of an uneducated owner. The uneducated owner then calls up Pedro and says, hey, Pedro, would you like Todd Gurley? And Pedro says, well, yeah, I'll take a risk on Todd Gurley. So he says, great, I'll trade you Todd Gurley for Ezekiel Elliott and Greg Olsen. And Pedro says, no, there's no way I'm going to trade Ezekiel Elliott, who was my number 1 pick, and Greg Olsen. Paul says, then send me an offer. Pedro says, I'll give you Randall Cobb and Justin Forsett. You see, what happens in the mind of someone like Paul after that is he goes, I couldn't possibly trade Todd Gurley for Justin Forsett and Randall Cobb. He was my number 1 pick. I have to get something for him. Aha. You see how that works, right? In terms of trading, when you guys need something, when you gotta get something, now you want value for that person who is shown to be a flop, and who you have given zero importance to, who you've even fucking benched after just 1 week. But now you understand the economics of a player after he's depreciated in value. That's when you guys understand that it happens all the fucking... Pedro's done this, by the way. Pedro's done shit like this. And I would even give Pedro credit to at least say that if Ezekiel Elliott didn't perform well, I think Pedro would have still been starting him. Because Pedro essentially did the same thing that you did this year, Paul. Then you guys understand the economics of a player when it comes to trading. Watch, it'll happen. I fucking warn all you guys. If Todd Gurley doesn't add up to what he needs to add up to, Paul's going to be fucking throwing offers, and he's going to want too much for Gurley. Because then Gurley has value. Gurley is then, he's Paul's then taken back to the moment when he drafted Gurley, and Gurley has that exact same value in Paul's head. So you start LeGarrette Blount, and LeGarrette Blount gets his little yardage. You would have beat Hensel anywhere, because Hensel, I'll get to Hensel in a second. So you start Blount, and Blount gets the yardage, and that's fine. You see, what you guys don't understand is this. This is about a whole season. You puff up your chest, and you get all excited, and you're like, I'm 2-0, I'm 2-0, I'm 2-0. Now, yesterday, when I lost to P, right before I lost to P, everybody wanted to make fun of the fact that I said, I've been 0-2 before. I've been 0-2 before. Jay wanted to make fun of me, and that's fine. 2013, I start 0-2. I make it to the championship. Last year, I start 0-2. I make it to the championship. I have the best record in the league, and I scored the most points. You see, folks, I may speak with a tone of arrogance. Oh, yes, it's there. It's there. But the papers have proven that I know what the fuck I'm talking about. Paul is going to have the same season that he had last season because he will continue to contradict himself in his managing. He wants to draft like a wild man and manage like a fucking pussy. He's 2-0. That's fine. That's all good and well. You know who was 2-0 last year? Yeah. Joe started the year at 2-0. Okay? Joe didn't make the playoffs last year. It happens. It happens, guys. It's the beginning of the season. And I'll also point something out to you by the end of this podcast to let you know exactly why it happens. You guys are all so short-sighted. And then by the end of the season, when there's only 4 teams left, and I'm always among those fucking 4 teams, and the rest of you, I'll see you at bars or something like that, and you'll be like, oh, who's still in it? Who's still in it? Well, you're not. You're not. Mr. Excited for 2-0 or fucking 1-2 or whatever the fuck. He continues to manage his team in the same way. You see, you guys do the same patterns every year. So that's why I can always talk to you like you're the same person and none of you guys are really getting better because you're not. Paul's got 1 victory and he's sticking his chest out on the chat like he's won something. You see, J. Ray can talk. Ed can talk. You know, Ed's only got 1. He ain't shit either. But, you know, the 4 of us are really the only people who talk shit on the chat. I mean, Pedro participates with his LOLs, and Orlando throws up memes, and then Andy sort of participates, and that's pretty much it. But Paul, of the 4, is the one that has the least right to fucking say anything. He hasn't done anything. He literally hasn't fucking done anything. But I digress. Player economics, sir. You draft a player number 1. And if there were 3 or 4 other guys that you picked after him that you could say that you would treat differently had the same thing happened week 1, if you would have started them in any case, doesn't matter who you had projected on the bench at that same position. If you had treated them differently, then that's who you should have picked. And moving forward, you're going to fucking deal with that headache. Because you're going to be questioning yourself. Am I a wild man or am I a pussy? Am I a wild? I'm a pussy. I'll start LeGarrette Blount. Oh, it helped now. You look like a fucking genius. You look like Vince Lombardi now. But it's not going to help in the future. It didn't help you last year and won't help you this year. So now that I finished just fucking reaming Paul, he absolutely just has nothing to say. It's just the facts. These are facts. This isn't just me talking down to Paul. These are fucking facts. He's a fucking loser. So what we're going to do is we're going to move on to Hensel, okay? Hensel, obviously, left Gronk in there. I saw Hensel later that Sunday, and Hensel's not listening to this. But you see, this is why Hensel's the worst team in the league. Hensel's the worst team in the league because he will continue to give people victories. Now, this week, the rest of his team didn't perform, so it didn't make a difference. Because Hensel had about 50-something points and Paul had like 90-something. By the way, Paul, you would have lost to me this week. Go fuck yourself. So it didn't make a difference. But this is why Hensel is the worst team in the league, because moving forward, whether he gets a win week 1, not even paying attention. I mean, this is something that you guys know. I mean, last season, he showed some signs of hope because he was updating his team, and now he's simply, he's just not fucking paying attention anymore. We'll monitor the situation, Commission I will, and we will make the necessary changes if need fucking be. Okay? Week 2 was a pretty close week in terms of these finals. Obviously, I lost to Pedro in that fucking last play, which to me was the fucking most ironic thing that's ever happened to me in fucking fantasy. This motherfucker, Jordan Matthews, catches the ball, gets 1 yard, gets the first down, which is great. He gets me 1 point closer to Pedro, but then I don't have the opportunity to do anything else because then the Eagles get into victory formation and whatever the fuck formation mode, and they just kneel the game out. So that was very fucking ironic. I lose to Pedro. Pedro now goes to a record of 2-0. Pedro goes to of 0-2, and Pedro goes to a record of 2-0. Andy loses to Mr. Giblets, who pulled off the victory late last night. So Ed now goes to a record of 2-0, and Andy is 0-2. No surprise there. As I said Andy was the best team on paper. I didn't say Andy was going to fucking win anything. Joe loses. No surprise there. Eric, who's looking pretty good this season, is the number 1 team of the week with a whopping score of 108 points. He beats Turtle Power, who once again is the odd man out this week because he faced Ed last week, who had gotten the highest point total, and now he's getting the highest point total against Eric. So this all brings back Ed's argument from last season, and I give up the least amount of points. I guess Orlando's not playing good enough defense. He's not standing in front of Eric's players like, hey, Eric, your players can't score. The most ridiculous fucking stat I've ever heard. Not the most ridiculous stat. The most ridiculous credit that was taken for anything in fantasy history is Ed last year when he said, and my teams give up the least amount of points. That's got absolutely nothing to do. This is like someone saying, I beat everyone in the league that week because I had the number 1. It's like, it doesn't matter. It's not going to show up on your fucking, who cares? But anyway, Paul, obviously, as I said, he beat Hensel. Hensel was the lowest scoring team of the week with 52 points. It is what it is, huh, Hensel? You fucking piece of shit. This is why the records really start to become nothing. I mean, after week 2, week 3, what we start to do is we sort of start to create this bumper car effect. And then by the end of week 5, the league looks completely different. You have me going against Andy in week 3. We're both 0-2. You have Hensel going up against Jason. They're both 1-1. You have Eric going up against Ed. They're both undefeated. Then you have the Gonzalez brothers going up against each other. They're both 0-2. And then you also have another undefeated matchup between the great Paul and Pedro. So this is why this means nothing. This is why last year I was able to start off the season 0-2 and end with the best record to make it to the champ. I didn't win either of those 2 years, by the way. I just wanted to mention. Obviously, I lost to Ed last year, and in 2013, I lost to Jason. I didn't, but the fact is that what I'm illustrating is that 0-2 means absolutely nothing. At least when you're fucking Bundy. At least when you're Bundy. Yeah, that's actually not paper. That's a bag of chips. This was your week 2 recap. Paul, go fuck yourself. I've already shown why you are so fucking inferior. And as always, may your quarterbacks get hurt before they get out of the locker room. May your running backs pull their calf muscles. And may your wide receivers get arrested for marijuana possession. Go fuck yourselves.